On a quiet, tree-lined street in Georgetown, a distinguished black woman walks home from work, her sapphire pendant catching the afternoon light. But that exquisite piece of jewelry draws unwanted attention as she passes by. Within moments, an officer singles her out and accuses her of theft. No questions, no evidence, just assumptions. The handcuffs snap closed with finality, but what this officer doesn't realize is that he's about to face the full weight of justice from the highest court in the land. Before we dive into this powerful story, let us know where you're watching. From in the comments below. The late autumn sun cast long shadows across the historic streets of Georgetown, Washington, D.C., where colonial brick townhouses stood shoulder to shoulder like sentinels of American history. Bronze and crimson leaves skittered across cobblestone walkways, and the air carried the crisp promise of winter just around the corner. Amara Richardson moved with measured elegance, her cashmere coat buttoned against the chill, leather briefcase swinging gently at her side. At 52, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime in rooms where her voice wasn't just heard but required. Her dark skin glowed in the autumn light, and around her neck hung a simple silver chain with a single sapphire pendant, deep blue and luminous as midnight. The necklace had been a gift from her husband, Supreme Court Justice Marcus Richardson, on their 25th wedding anniversary. "Something as enduring as you," he had whispered, when he clasped it around her neck. The memory brought a smile to her face as she turned onto her street, just 3 blocks from home. She had just left a lecture at Georgetown Law School, where she'd been invited as a distinguished speaker on constitutional law. Before her appointment, as Chief Justice of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, she had been one of the country's most respected constitutional scholars. Her name badge was still clipped to her coat. Judge Amara Richardson, D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. Officer James Keller sat in his patrol car at the corner of M Street and Wisconsin Avenue, drumming his fingers against the steering wheel. At 38, his once promising career had stalled after a series of formal complaints about his aggressive tactics in predominantly black neighborhoods. Today, he was in a particularly foul mood. Passed over for promotion again, this time for an officer 10 years his junior. When Amara walked past his cruiser, Keller's eyes narrowed. Something about her confidence, the way she walked like she belonged in this wealthy neighborhood, set his teeth on edge, his gaze fixed on the gleaming sapphire at her throat. "Too nice for this part of town," he muttered to himself, putting the car in drive and pulling alongside her. "Excuse me, ma'am," he called through the open window. His voice carried that false politeness that barely masked contempt. Amara stopped, turning toward the voice with a slight furrow in her brow. Years on the bench had taught her to read people instantly, and something in this officer's tone made her shoulders tense. "Yes, officer," she replied, her voice calm but reserved. Keller stepped out of the car, standing too close, invading her. Space in that way he'd perfected over years of intimidation tactics. "That's quite a piece you're wearing," he said, nodding toward her necklace. "Mind telling me where you got it?" Amara blinked, momentarily taken aback by the question. "It was a gift from my husband," she said simply. "A gift?" Keller repeated, skepticism dripping from each syllable. "That looks pretty expensive. Must be quite a generous husband." The air between them shifted, growing thick with tension. Passers-by slowed their pace, sensing the confrontation brewing on the sidewalk. "Is there a problem, officer?" Amara asked, her judicial training kicking in. "Stay calm, ask direct questions, establish facts." "Well, that depends," Keller said, folding his arms across his chest. We've had reports of a burglary 3 blocks over. Jewelry stolen, including a blue stone necklace. Seems like quite a coincidence. It was a lie, crafted on the spot, but delivered with the confidence of someone who knew his word would be believed over hers. That's not possible, Amara said firmly. This necklace has been mine for years. I've just come from Georgetown Law where I was lecturing. My ID is right here. She gestured to the badge still pinned to her coat. Keller barely glanced at it. Anyone can get a fake ID these days, he scoffed. Going to need you to come down to the station to sort this out. On what grounds? Amara's voice remained steady, but her heart pounded against her ribs. 20 years on the bench, and here. She stood being treated like a criminal because of a blue stone and black skin. Suspicion of possession of stolen property, Keller said, the words practiced and hollow. Turn around, please. I'm not turning around, Amara said, standing her ground. I'm Judge Amara Richardson of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and you have no probable cause to detain me. Keller's expression darkened. Listen, lady, I don't care if you're the Queen of England. When an officer gives you an order, you comply. By now, a small crowd had gathered. A young woman with braided hair had her phone out, recording quietly. An elderly white couple watched from across the street, expressions troubled. I'm going to reach for my phone, Amara said clearly, making sure everyone heard. To call my husband. I am not resisting. No, you're not, Keller snapped, grabbing her wrist with unnecessary force. Hands behind your back. Now. The cold bite of handcuffs against her wrists sent shockwaves through Amara's body. Not fear. She was too controlled for that. But a deep, simmering rage that this could still happen, here, now, to her. You're making a serious mistake, she said, each word precise as a gavel strike. That's what they all say, Keller muttered, leading her toward the patrol car. Get in. Inside the cruiser, Amara sat perfectly still, her mind racing through federal statutes, departmental procedures, and the names of every police commissioner and oversight board member in the district. But beneath the legal calculations, a deeper wound throbbed. The knowledge that her robe, her title, her degrees, none of it had protected her from this moment. As Keller drove, she managed to press the emergency call button on her smartwatch. One discreet tap that connected directly to her husband's phone. 3 miles away, in his chambers at the Supreme Court, Justice Marcus Richardson was reviewing briefs for an upcoming case when his phone buzzed with the emergency alert. He answered immediately, hearing only background noise at first, the hum of a car engine, then his wife's voice, measured and clear. Officer, I need to inform you that I am Judge Amara Richardson. You are currently detaining me without cause, which constitutes a violation of my Fourth Amendment rights. Then a man's dismissive laugh. Sure, and I'm the Attorney General. Save it for someone who cares. Marcus's blood turned to ice. In 23 years on the bench, 12 of them on the Supreme Court, he had maintained the judicial temperament that had earned him respect from both conservatives and liberals. But in this moment, hearing the barely controlled tension in his wife's voice, something primal roared through his veins. He grabbed his coat and was out the door before his clerk could even ask what was wrong. At the precinct, Officer Keller marched. Amara threw the front doors with a showman's flourish, his prize catch of the day. The desk sergeant looked up, eyes widening at the sight of a clearly professional woman in handcuffs. Got a shoplifter with an attitude, Keller announced loudly. Fancy necklace, no receipt, won't cooperate. The sergeant frowned. Did she resist? Arrest? Not physically, Keller admitted, but she tried to talk her way out of it. Claims she's some big-shot judge. The sergeant's frown deepened. Did you check her ID? These people always have a story, Keller said dismissively. I've been doing this job for 15 years. Trust me, I know the type. From across the room, a young officer named Tanya Rodriguez watched with growing concern. Something about this didn't feel right. The woman's composed demeanor, her tailored coat, the badge still pinned to her lapel. I'd like to make my phone. Call now, Amara said calmly. And I need these cuffs removed. They're unnecessarily tight. Keller scoffed. All in good time, Your Honor, he said with mocking emphasis on the title. Rodriguez approached cautiously. Sir, maybe you should get back to your paperwork, Keller cut her off. I've got this handled. The precinct doors swung open with a decisive bang, and a hush fell over the room like a blanket of snow. Justice Marcus Richardson stood in the doorway, 6'3" and imposing in his dark overcoat. He didn't storm, didn't yell. He simply entered the space, with the quiet authority of someone used to having the final word. Every officer in the room froze, recognition dawning on their faces. Justice Richardson's distinguished profile had graced enough news broadcasts and law school textbooks to be instantly recognizable. My wife, he said, his voice low and controlled. Where is she? Keller turned, confusion replacing the smug expression he'd worn moments before. Your wife? Marcus's eyes found Amara across the room, the handcuffs still binding her wrists, and something dangerous flashed across his face. A moment of raw fury quickly masked by judicial restraint. Captain, he called, addressing the highest-ranking officer he could see. I am Supreme Court Justice Marcus Richardson. The woman your officer has detained is Judge Amara Richardson of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. I'd like these cuffs removed immediately, and then I'd like an explanation. The captain, a veteran officer named Harrison, moved faster than he had in years, personally unlocking Amara's handcuffs and offering profuse apologies. Keller stood frozen, the blood draining from his face as the reality of his situation dawned on him. Justice Richardson, Judge Richardson, I cannot express how deeply, Captain Harrison began. Save it, Marcus interrupted, his arm now protectively around his wife's shoulders. I want to know on what grounds my wife was detained, searched, and humiliated. All eyes turned to Keller, who suddenly looked much smaller than he had minutes earlier. There was a report, he began weakly, of stolen jewelry matching her necklace. Was there? Marcus asked, voice dangerously soft. Because I just spoke with dispatch on my way over. No such report exists. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the phone seemed to stop ringing. Perhaps Officer Keller misunderstood, Captain Harrison suggested, shooting a venomous look at his subordinate. Or perhaps Amara spoke for the first time since her husband's arrival, her voice clear and steady. Officer Keller saw a black woman in Georgetown and decided she couldn't possibly belong there without having stolen something first. Keller's face flushed. That's not... I would never... Never what? Marcus asked. Profile someone based on their race. Because my wife's record as a federal judge is spotless, while your departmental file, Officer Keller, which I will be reviewing thoroughly, contains 3 formal complaints of racial bias in the last 2 years alone. How Marcus knew this was a mystery, but no one dared question a Supreme Court justice with a photographic memory and connections throughout every level of government. Justice Richardson, Captain Harrison interjected, I assure you this matter will be dealt with severely. Officer Keller is suspended effective immediately pending a full investigation. Good, Marcus nodded. But this isn't just about Officer Keller. This is about a system that allowed him to operate this way for years without consequence. I'll be speaking with the Attorney General about a pattern and practice investigation into this precinct. The threat hung in the air like a guillotine blade. As well, Amara added, removing her judge's credentials from her purse and placing them on the desk. I'll be filing a formal complaint with the Office of Police Complaints and the Civil Rights Division. Not for my benefit, but for every person who has been subjected to this treatment without the protection of a title or a husband on the Supreme Court. Keller's arrogance had evaporated entirely, replaced by the sickening realization that his career was likely over. Justice Richardson, I didn't know. That's precisely the problem, Amara said, her gaze piercing. You shouldn't need to know who I am married to in order to treat me with basic dignity and respect. The young officer, Rodriguez, stepped forward hesitantly. Judge Richardson, I'd like to formally apologize. I saw what was happening and I didn't intervene forcefully enough. Amara's expression softened slightly. Next time, trust your instincts, Officer Rodriguez. The bravest thing an officer can do is hold another officer accountable. As the Richardsons prepared to leave, Captain Harrison asked nervously, "Will there be press involvement in this matter?" Marcus and Amara exchanged a look. "That depends," Marcus said, "on what happens next. This isn't about public embarrassment or revenge. It's about ensuring this never happens again, to anyone." They walked out together, shoulders straight, leaving behind a precinct in turmoil. 3 months later, Officer James Keller sat in a classroom at the police academy, not as an instructor, but as a student. The course: Constitutional Rights and Community Trust. At the front of the room stood Amara Richardson, not as a victim, but as an educator. "The Fourth Amendment," she was saying, "protects citizens from unreasonable search and seizure. But beyond the legal framework, there's a human element at play. Every interaction between law enforcement and the public either builds trust or erodes it." Keller sat silently, his notebook open, his badge missing from his chest. The internal investigation had revealed a pattern of biased policing that could have ended his career entirely. Instead, Judge Richardson had made a surprising recommendation: rehabilitation over termination. "I don't want your badge," she had told him during the hearing. "I want your understanding. I want you to see the damage you've caused and commit yourself to repairing it." The department had agreed to a conditional reinstatement, 6 months of intensive retraining, community service in the neighborhoods he had policed so carelessly, and regular sessions with both a cultural competency coach and a psychologist. "Today," Amara continued, addressing the whole class, but her eyes occasionally finding Keller's, "we'll be discussing implicit bias, the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner." After class, Keller approached her tentatively. "Judge Richardson," he said, his voice lacking its former bravado, "I want to thank you for this opportunity. Many people would have wanted me fired." "Firing you would have been easier," she replied candidly. "Transforming you is harder, but potentially more impactful. One reformed officer who truly understands their bias can influence dozens of colleagues over a career." Keller nodded slowly. "I never saw myself as... I always thought I was just being a good cop." "That's how bias works," Amara said. "It convinces us our unfounded suspicions are actually good instincts. It blinds us to our own blindness." As he turned to leave, she added, "Officer Keller, this isn't absolution. It's a second chance that came at a high cost. Not just to me, but to everyone who experienced your good policing before our paths crossed. Don't waste it. That evening, as Marcus and Amara sat on their back porch watching the sunset, he asked what many had wondered. Why give him another chance? After what he did? Amara was quiet for a moment, her fingers absently touching the sapphire at her throat. Because justice isn't always about punishment, she finally said. Sometimes it's about transformation. And I want to believe transformation is possible. I have to believe it. Or what's the point of any of this? Marcus took her hand, understanding in his eyes. They had both devoted their lives to a system they knew was flawed, working from within to bend the arc of justice towards something more perfect. 1 year later, a ceremony was held at the police academy. A new training center focused on constitutional policing and community relations was being dedicated, named in honor of Judge Amara Richardson. Among those in attendance was Officer James Keller, back on duty but fundamentally changed. As he listened to Amara speak about the importance of dignity in policing, his hand instinctively rose to his chest, where a new pin was affixed next to his reinstated badge. It was small, sapphire blue, a reminder of the day his assumptions nearly destroyed not just one woman's dignity, but his own humanity. When a rookie officer beside him whispered, "What's that pin mean?" Keller replied simply, "It means I remember who I was, and I choose daily who I will become." As Judge Richardson concluded her speech, her eyes momentarily met Keller's across the room. There was no warm forgiveness there. Some bridges can never be fully repaired. But there was recognition of the work he had done, the change he was trying to embody. "The law," she said, addressing the gathered officers and officials, "is not just about enforcement. It's about protection, and you cannot protect what you do not respect. Remember that every person you encounter, regardless of their appearance or circumstance, is entitled to dignity, to due process, to the presumption of innocence." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "The badge you wear is not a shield from accountability. It is a symbol of your promise to uphold the Constitution for everyone. Wear it with humility, with awareness, and with the knowledge that true justice begins with seeing the humanity in those you serve." As applause filled the room, Keller joined in, knowing better than most the weight and truth of her words. If you found this story moving, please like and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that illuminate social justice issues. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts or similar experiences. Let's create a community of understanding and growth together.